Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by J.P. Morgan Chase, a partner in financial planning. Looking ahead to retirement, growing your business, or for commercial banking, J.P. Morgan Chase offers advice and solutions tailored to individual needs and client well-being. More information is at jpmorganchase.com. And by Luba Workers Comp, a regional insurance carrier dedicated to providing reliable workers' compensation coverage to employers and workers in 13 states across the Southeast. With personalized service, trusted expertise, and tailored solutions, Luba helps businesses protect what matters most. Discover more at lubawc.com.
From Collins on St. Charles Avenue in Uptown New Orleans, we're out to lunch with Peter Raschuti, Tulane University A.B. Freeman School of Business professor and director of the Birkenroad Reports. It's business, New Orleans style.
Hi, I'm Peter Raschuti. Welcome to Out to Lunch. In the 1800s, Thomas Edison invented, among other things, the light bulb, the record player, and the first motion picture capture device, which paved the way for the birth of movies. Was Thomas Edison a genius? In response to that question, Edison said, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration," meaning you have a great idea, but you also have to have the tenacity and work ethic to bring it to life. So how do you do that? New Orleans' most recently successful companies, Lucid, which sold for over $1 billion, and Levelset, which sold for $500 million, were both founded with assistance from Business Accelerator, the Idea Village. Today, a lot of entrepreneurs owe their foundational steps and their growth to business accelerators and incubators. Okay, but what if you have a great idea for a business and you don't get accepted to a business incubator? Or maybe you live in a place where there's no incubator, accelerator, or even anyone who can give you any business advice at all. Then what do? Then you ask Solomon. Solomon is an AI-powered business accelerator, but the business guidance you're going to get from it is not generic AI advice pulled off the internet. Solomon's business advice is drawn from the experience of real humans, who Solomon refers to as luminaries. One of these luminaries is Chris Moe. Chris is the grandfather of Louisiana startups, the founder of a revolutionary food delivery app, Waiter. At Waiter, Chris came up with technology that took food delivery beyond pizza and Chinese food to all restaurants and paved the way for a generational change in dining in. Today, Chris is the co-founder of a company called Kimana, which is spelled Qimana. It's the company that created Solomon. Chris Moe, great to see you again. Welcome back to Out to Lunch.
Thanks for having me back.
My other lunch guest today, Chuck Perrette, is revolutionizing architecture. Chuck is not an architect. He grew up in a family business that printed architectural blueprints. With the advent of the internet, architects started relying less on printed blueprints and instead started emailing contractors and subcontractors. Now, if you've ever tried to organize anything more complex than dinner for two by email, you know what a cluster that can turn into. So imagine how unwieldy an email chain gets when you're trying to communicate about construction and design issues with contractors and subcontractors. That's why Chuck Perrette was inspired to create Centerline, a cloud-based data management for architects that pulls their project-related information out of the inbox and puts it into what's called the project information model. Chuck launched Centerline in 2021, began taking clients in 2022, saw 350% growth in 2023, and today the company has architectural firm clients across the country. Chuck Perrette, welcomed Out to Lunch.
Thank you, Peter. Good to see you.
Now, Chris, I signed into Solomon and I asked to speak to you. An online version of you showed up and had what seemed to be a very real conversation with me. You answered my questions, and you prompted me with questions, not prosaic AI-type clickbait questions to keep me on the hook, but real challenging, probing questions about my business. And you answered questions about your business. I asked you how Solomon is going to be profitable, and you said the key is to provide enough value that users are willing to pay for the service. Well, I felt like I was getting great advice and I was subscribing to the free option. What more do I get if I choose the paid subscription model?
Yeah, so you get the same things whether you're on the free version or the paid version. You just get more of it. So there are limits to how many question and answer pairs you can ask on the free version versus on the paid version. And it's mostly geared towards the different ways that AI has evolved as kind of the backbone of applications that are being built on top of it. But you'll get similar advice, just a lot more of it.
And I noticed, I noticed the mascot for Solomon, a little robot head, is the same color and has the same bow tie that was the graphic for Waiter. Obviously, that's intentional. Is there any other connection between Solomon and Waiter?
Yeah, so there's a story behind that. I ran Waiter for 7 years. We built it from an idea on a napkin to an IPO on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. I was ousted out of Waiter not long after that, and it progressed on for another 7 years or so. And in the end, it failed. And it failed for a lot of different reasons. That's a story for another day. But there was an asset sale, and there was one asset that I wanted to acquire, and that was the trademark from that bow tie. So I acquired that in the asset sale, and it paid $159 for it. And I said, if I own it, I'm going to use it. And so I used it for Kimana.
That is very resourceful. That is true. And it is a nice little logo, I got to admit. It's worth keeping.
It's certainly recognizable throughout the Gulf South, for sure.
Now, Chuck, Centerline is enormously successful. At last count, I see that you had over 12,000 registered users for a niche product that only started taking clients in 2022. That's impressive. But I'm wondering how you prevent all these architects from hearing about Slack or any of the other online communication tools from companies like Salesforce. What does Centerline do that these other products don't?
Well, I think that the origin of Centerline really speaks to that, right? In that if you're an architect, you're spending all of your day working through a kind of a standardized rule book around how projects are run. No other generic tool really anticipates the way that you go about your day and the way that you manage a project, the way that Centerline is purpose-built around the standards and practices of architectural practice management.
And Chuck, what is it about email that just doesn't work for you? You even said sometimes you worry if it even gets there.
Yeah, well, obviously, right? Like, if you've imagine if you had a piece of critical or even non-critical information. If you send something to someone by email, almost every single person who's ever done that will, if enough time passes and if it's urgent enough, follow up with a phone call, follow up with a text. It requires a secondary thing. Sometimes people say, well, okay, well, we'll click on the little read receipts, right? I want a receipt to come back. But you're not obligated to send those. And if you're like me, you just have all that stuff turned off by default anyway. So, email is just fundamentally not great for what we call transactional communication. And that's really where Centerline steps in. And in particular, again, there's any number of industries where that I think suffer from their use of email. And I think that the internet generally is sort of waking up, the working world is waking up to the shortcomings of email, and every vertical market is replacing it in some way, shape, or form. I just happen to be the one that's focusing on architects.
Chris, where do you get these luminaries? You are a luminary, but how do you get them? Are they paid?
Well, yeah, they can monetize their knowledge on our platform, but we find them in the community, and the goal is to connect entrepreneurs with local luminaries. And it's funny that Chuck and I are on this show together today. I'll tell a quick story about how this luminary thing came about. I was working with Chuck, learning about Centerline, and trying to find ways that I could help introduce him to luminaries or others that could help build his business, and learned a lot about that business and why it was critical about what he was doing. And through that whole process and Chuck and I's conversations, I just knew there had to be a better way. And Rolf McCollister and I had been talking about how do we connect luminaries and entrepreneurs for a number of years. And with that experience with Chuck, I learned that AI might be the solution to making those luminaries available at the local level, but making them available in a way that was 24/7. So you didn't have to know somebody to set up a meeting with a person that then you could go sit down and talk business about or get advice from or share experiences with. But you could do it through AI, and then if you didn't get the answers using that AI, then you could book an in-person meeting with those folks. And it was working with Chuck and other entrepreneurs that I worked with, plus the conversations that Rolf and I had about the demands on our time from people who wanted to talk to us and find out, how did we do it? How do we build a business? How did we sell that business? Why did we build the business? Why did we sell it? And we're like, bring that in person together with that AI, and then you give entrepreneurs the resources that they need to succeed.
And Chuck, I think I read somewhere that you didn't take venture capital. How did you fund the company?
Yeah, so we in bootstrapping, Centerline, I guess coming out of the gate, I had a 25-year career that previously, that preceded Centerline, and throughout that time, I had been building little tools, hacking together technology-based applications to solve individual little problems. The limitation was always, well, what is the furthest that technology can do? The problems have been hiding there in plain sight, right? The problem is not the problem, so to speak, right? But the solutions, the implementing and creating solutions has really been limited by bandwidth, by the growth of the internet, right? So by hacking together lots of little tools, I also had relationships with architects who saw value in the things that we were doing. So when we began Centerline in the summer of 2020, when we first started creating this, I let people know, I let a few of our close clients know that this is it. We're building the mothership application, the thing that we've all kind of, I think, seen as a possibility. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could do this and this and this and this on the platform? And so, with the help and support, of commitments from people who were existing customers, by the time we turned the lights on, we had people that were ready to go, right? And that has made it possible.
I want to say something about his business because, in working with Chuck, I learned a lot about it. When we went to meet with an architect, and that architect was mostly doing all of his communications over email, what I discovered that what he does is he's taken a workflow that was normally very fragmented, and he's put it into an organized workflow that made sense to architects. And, at least the ones I talked to, every time they saw it, it was like right away they get it, right? Like, this will make my life so much easier.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely part of the, that's been, I think, the source of our, of our growth, and a lot of the positive, feedback that I get from architects is, oh my gosh, where has this been my whole life, right? When people try it, if you're out there managing your projects, you're managing millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of construction out of an inbox, a spreadsheet, and some kind of some kind of file server where you're storing PDFs over here, you're writing things down that who got what when, at this point, when is it due, and then you wake up every morning and you go to bed every night, the first thing you do and the last thing you do is you're going through an inbox on your phone and you're dragging and dropping email into sorted folders. That's your life, right? And you know, one of if there's a shorthand version of the value that we provide, it's that we help architects do all the things that are not architecture, right? All the things that's part of their project, all that is part of their normal business day that is not architecture. We want to take all that off your plate and just let you focus on being an architect.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Peter Raschuti. I'm talking with Chuck Perrett, founder of the architectural communications software company Centerline, and Chris Moe, co-founder of an online business consultancy app called Solomon. We'll continue our conversation when we come right back from this short break.
Out to Lunch is brought to you by Basics Underneath. Fine lingerie, personalized fitting, curated swimsuits, and workout wear. Uptown on Magazine Street and at basicsunderneath.com. And by Tracy Moore, broker, realtor, and partner at Rev Realtors, offering over 20 years of experience representing buyers, sellers, and investors. Learn more at tracy.revrealtors.com.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Peter Raschuti. I'm talking with Chuck Perrett, founder of architectural communications software company Centerline, and Chris Moe, co-founder of an online business consultancy app called Solomon. Chris, you took a startup and brought it all the way to a NASDAQ-listed company. How does the business model and the plan work for this company?
Well, this company is about doing that for other companies. So, our whole goal, and when we started the company, and it did truly started when I was working with Chuck, is where the idea really started to formulate and come together in my head, is like, why do companies go through the challenges that they go through? And we all know the statistics, right? We hear 90% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. Why is that, right? Well, it's because no one's ever tried to find a different solution for giving them a higher likelihood of success. You mentioned one earlier, whereas if a business goes into an accelerator program like Idea Village, which is a great program, that they have a much higher likelihood of success. In fact, it's almost 30% higher likelihood of success going through an accelerator program. But less than 1% of all companies in the world ever get access to a program like that. So our goal was, how do we increase the likelihood of business success? We built the world's largest business accelerator using AI and in-person human knowledge, right? Because what is AI anyway? AI is just a collection of all the human knowledge that is publicly available up to a certain point in time. But what about all that human knowledge that is not collected yet? And that's what we do. We curate that luminary knowledge. Those are the people who've been there and done it, as well as the innovators, the others who want to have the conversations with the luminaries, into a single point, and then we make it accessible and then transferable to other humans.
And you're going to charge you're going with a subscription model. I guess you have ads or anything. Do you have that as well?
No, not at this point. No, it's you pay a monthly fee and you get access to it, and eventually we'll have a pay-as-you-go plan as well. But the most important thing is people can get started for free. And you get a lot of advice for free. And then if it's working for you, then you want to move into a higher level plan where you can have more conversations, get access to more luminaries, then you can pay for one of those subscription plans.
I'll jump in there. I was a graduate of, or went through the Idea Villages program. And as I had mentioned just a minute ago, right, I ran a small business for 25 years. My business brain was wired in the small business world. And one of the great things that I learned coming out of the Idea Village that I feel like really has helped, I mean, Centerline would not be where it is today without the Idea
We've had
Village.
That conversation.
Full stop, right? And it's about that sort of access to, hey, just a pivot in the way that you run a venture scalable startup company. It's a totally different mindset and set of motivations than what it's like. The way I learned to run a business was as a small business. And I will say that like the just understanding the value that I got out of that one program, the notion of scaling that opportunity to me seems really compelling.
Yeah, and then
Right.
making it accessible to anyone,
And- right,
so they
exactly.
can all have that same advantage that you had after
For sure.
going through Idea Village. And not only that, but the organizations, Idea Village and Opportunity Machine and all the accelerators we have here in Louisiana, they can all have their own organization on our platform where they bring their luminaries and their innovators together within that organization. And that doesn't exist today. If you ask John, by the way, John said, tell you hello, Peter. If you ask John, one of the most difficult tasks he has at Idea Village, it's getting the mentors together, aggregating them, and then creating a way for them to give back their time in an organized fashion where the innovators in the programs get access to them. It's really hard to coordinate all of that, right? Well, Solomon is the platform where Idea Village can now bring all of their innovators and all of their luminaries together on a single platform and allow them to schedule time together, to collaborate either through AI conversations or in-person real conversations. One platform, giving every company access to what Chuck had when he went into Idea Village, and also what we had when we were at the Seed Center in Lake Charles when we were first starting Waiter.
I was thinking about is we've had a number of consultants on the show, and they ask, when we ask them a question, which is the toughest thing for them, is how to tell somebody that their business isn't going to work. That just seems, or they basically their baby's ugly. What do you? How does this handle that?
Well, you let them find out for themselves. And the way that they find out for themselves is they go through a process called customer development, right? Where, here's one of the big mistakes I think a lot of people make, and Chuck and I have talked about this as well, but they will go to the death for something that they never even gone out and talked to people about whether they would pay money for it, right? They just, in their mind, they have decided that people will pay money for this, and so they will do all of the work that they think is necessary to get people to pay money, but they've never talked to anyone. And I'm going to give you an example in my own life about that. So when we started Waiter, we started for dine-in. We were going to solve the problem where you could go into a restaurant, sit down at a table, order on your phone, order another beer when you were ready. You didn't have to flag down a server. And we talked to restaurant owners, and they loved the idea. And we talked to consumers, and they loved the idea. And we talked to all of our friends, all of our stakeholders, everyone. And we went out and we built a prototype to go do this. Actually, we built an MVP. It was a working product. There was one constituent we never talked to about it. And we went in to test it at the restaurant, and it was a disaster. We were trying to get rid of the friction in the restaurant, by having to flag down a server and order another beer when you want another beer, or, order dessert or bring the check, those kind of things. And the only constituent we never talked to were the servers. And the servers, we found out real quick, were the obstacle to anybody paying money to get to do this, right? And so what did we do? We had to flip our model on its head, and we had to start with delivery and said, okay, the reason the servers were the obstacle is they were not going to tell people how to download an app at a table that they felt was going to take their job, right? And so we said, okay, let's do delivery first. People will download the app in the comfort of their own home. And then when they walk into the restaurant, we'll just pop the menu up on their screen and say, hey, here's the menu. You can order on this app. Problem was when we launched delivery, it took off like a rocket, and we never got back to dine-in, right? So you don't know when to stop, but you should know when to pivot, right? And if you go ask people, they will tell you when to pivot.
One of my mentors right now, Max Menke with GrowthX out in California, is drilled into my head, never bring feelings to a data fight, right? Yeah. And that part of that ethos of talk to your customers, get to know them, right? And then they'll tell you what they need. They will tell you where the pain is. I mean, in Centerline's experience, our customers save 50% of the amount of time that they normally spend in project administration. They cut that time in half. using Centerline.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a quick story about Centerline again, because we had this conversation, and I was like, okay, I get it. It sounds interesting, but let's go talk to an architect. I have a friend who's an architect. I want to take you to him and talk to him. I want to see it firsthand. Like, does this really matter? So we set up the meeting, and we went to Lafayette, and we met with the architect. And within the first 10 minutes of the meeting, it was like real clear to me. It was like, oh crap, these guys are solving a major problem. And I didn't have a lot of time that day, but I sat there and I listened for about an hour and a half. And like, the architect was just like, you've solved all the world's problems. You made my life so much better. And I said, look guys, I got to go, but I want to know how this ends. So I leave, and I called Chuck the next day. He said, well, I stayed another 2 hours and we got him onboarded.
Yeah, right.
Like right then and there.
That's it. It was done.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you know that you have a product that's going to work, right?
Now, Chuck, most of the time we think of asking the customer what they want. You created something and they loved it. Is this a different way to approach it?
Well, I mean, so I'm the beneficiary of having had a very unique perspective on the way that architects communicate with their clients, with their consultants, and with contractors. Because for most of human history, they did that by way of a paper document, right? And then as that scaled, the role of the blueprinter just came up. And so architects used to just hand us those paper documents and say, make 5 copies of this and send one to this person and one to this person and one to this person. And, in that industry, there's sort of 2 kinds of people. There's the person that just keeps their eyes closed and just says, you give me 1, I'll make you 10, and they don't think about it. I'm just not that sort of person, and I wanted to know why. Why do you need to make 10 copies of this? Who needs to see this? And why do they need to see it? And when they see it, what are they going to do with it? And so I got a real up close and personal view of what, in McKinsey famously identified as the outside of agriculture is the second least technology friendly vertical market, in the United States right now, which is design and construction. It's an extremely, it's dependent on manual processes. And we refer to that, a lot of times as MESS, manual entry in spreadsheets, or manual efforts in spreadsheets. And it's like, we're out to, that anywhere you see that, and this is where I think is just generally common between Chris and I, is that we're not out. We both see technology from the perspective of it being a force enabler. It is a thing that amplifies. It's a megaphone that can amplify our users' efforts. I like to use this example that Steve Jobs used to like to say, that the computer is a bicycle for your mind.
So I heard something this week that I think brings that point home. I was watching a podcast, and I think it was Vinod Khosla that was doing the podcast. And he said, in the past, people have learned computers, right? And we spent a lifetime learning computers, learning how to use Excel, learning how to use email, learning all of these things. In the future, and today is the future moving forward, computers are learning humans, right? And I think that, you asked the question earlier, you made a comment earlier about, will AI replace humans, and will it take people's jobs? No, humans still have the knowledge, right? And the computers are going to learn the human knowledge. Now, just like humans that used computers had a leg up on those that didn't, well, humans that use AI are going to have a leg up on those that don't, right? But humans are still there. Like, you're not going to replace the architect, right? You're going to make his job easier, and you're going to take away a lot of the the misery that an architect has had to have in the past, and because you have a better workflow, but that architect still has to do the drawings.
There are only so many hours in a day. You can fill them doing any number of things. You can go to work, you can come home, you can relax, maybe go see a movie, watch TV, write poetry, play sports, or you could invent an AI-powered business, or you could invent an AI-powered business consultant, or reinvent architectural communications. Chris and Chuck, your respective accomplishments are extraordinarily impressive, and perhaps the most amazing part of them is there's more to come. It's been great to learn about Centerline and Solomon, and I look forward to keeping up with your continued success. Thank you both for taking the time to join me today on Out to Lunch.
Thanks, Peter.
My guests on Out to Lunch today have been Chris Moe, co-founder and CEO of Keymana, and the online business consultant app Solomon, and Chuck Perrett, founder and owner of Centerline. We edited the show to fit into the time slot here on WWNO. You can hear our unedited conversation and find out more about Chris and Chuck's inspiration and perspiration by listening to the Out to Lunch podcast. You can find and subscribe to the Out to Lunch podcast on your podcast app and on our website, itsneworleans.com. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from this show on itsneworleans.com and on our Out to Lunch social media. These photos were taken today by Jill LaFleur. You can find more of Jill's photos at lafleurphoto.com. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsneworleans.com and WWNO 89.9 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris, our technical producer is Eric Merle, and our researcher is Amy Irvin. I'm Peter Raschuti. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the lunch table for more business, New Orleans style, on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch was recorded live at Columns on St. Charles Avenue. Columns serves lunch and dinner 7 days a week, hosts weddings and private events, features evenings of live jazz and more. Reservations for dining and hotel rooms are at thecolumns.com. Columns is a member of New Orleans & Company. More information at neworleans.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker. Established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by J.P. Morgan Chase, a partner in financial planning. Looking ahead to retirement, growing your business, or for commercial banking, J.P. Morgan Chase offers advice and solutions tailored to individual needs and client well-being. More information is at jpmorganchase.com. And by Luba Workers' Comp, a regional insurance carrier dedicated to providing reliable workers' compensation coverage to employers and workers in 13 states across the Southeast. With personalized service, trusted expertise, and tailored solutions, Luba helps businesses protect what matters most. Discover more at lubawc.com. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com.